The year is 1914. A strange tension hangs in the summer air, thick and heavy like the calm before a storm. In the sun-drenched streets of Paris, London, and Berlin, life hums along its usual course. People fall in love, children play in the parks, and the rhythms of industry promise a future brighter than the last. But beneath this veneer of progress and peace, a dark current is gathering strength. Old empires, groaning under the weight of their own history, eye each other with suspicion. Alliances, forged in secret rooms and whispered conversations, have divided the continent into two armed camps. A single spark is all that is needed to ignite the entire powder keg. And then, in the quiet streets of Sarajevo, that spark flies. An assassin's bullet finds its mark, and a royal couple lies dead. The news spreads like a virus, from capital to capital, carried along telegraph wires. Ultimatums are issued and then ignored. Declarations of war follow, one after another, like a cascade of falling dominoes. The great powers of Europe, who had boasted of their civilization and enlightenment, begin a headlong rush into the abyss. The world as it was known is about to be consumed by fire, and no one, not even the wisest statesman, can see a way to stop it. The lamps are going out all over Europe. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. Far from the battlefields of the Western Front, another ancient power watches the unfolding chaos with a mixture of fear and ambition. This is the Ottoman Empire, the once mighty caliphate that had stretched from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Indian Ocean. For centuries, its name had inspired awe and terror. But now, it is the sick man of Europe, a sprawling, multi-ethnic empire, decaying from within. Its armies are antiquated, its treasury is empty, and its provinces are in a constant state of rebellion. Russia, its jeweled enemy, presses from the north, hungry for Constantinople. Britain and France circle like vultures, eager to carve up its vast territories in the Middle East. The empire's rulers in Constantinople, a group of young, ambitious officers known as the Young Turks, see the European war not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Led by the powerful triumvirate of Enver Pasha, Talat Pasha, and Jamal Pasha, they believe a daring gamble is needed to save the empire from its slow, agonizing death. They dream of restoring its lost glory, of forging a new pan-Turkic empire stretching into Central Asia. To do this, they need a powerful ally. They look to Berlin, to the rising might of Imperial Germany. Germany, for its part, sees the Ottomans as a valuable pawn, a way to threaten Britain's hold on India and Russia's southern flank. A secret alliance is forged. In late October 1914, under the command of a German admiral, Ottoman warships, flying the Sultan's flag, slip into the Black Sea. Without a declaration of war, they bombard the Russian ports of Odessa and the act is a point of no return. Russia declares war, and Britain and France soon follow. The Ottoman Empire has plunged into the Great War. Enver Pasha, the charismatic and reckless minister of war, is due. He promises a swift and glorious victory. He tells his people that the armies of the Sultan will reclaim their lost lands, and that the enemy will be crushed. But his promises are built on a foundation of fantasy. In the freezing Caucasus Mountains, Enver Pasha leads a massive army against the Russians. The campaign is a catastrophe. Ill-equipped and poorly led, the Ottoman soldiers freeze to death by the tens of thousands in the winter snows of summer. It is one of the most staggering military disasters of the entire war. The dream of a quick victory dies in the icy wilderness. On other fronts, the situation is just as grim. A British-led invasion at Gallipoli is barely repelled, but at a horrific cost in human lives. In Mesopotamia, British forces advance toward Baghdad. In the deserts of the south, the Arab revolt, fanned by British gold and promises of independence, tears away the empire's The empire's military machine, strained beyond its limits, begins to collapse. Soldiers, unpaid and starving, desert. In droves, the weapons they carry are obsolete, and the factories at home cannot produce enough ammunition to keep them fighting. The state, already weak, begins to dissolve. As the armies crumble at the frontiers, a deeper darkness falls upon the homeland. The war provides the Young Turk government with a pretext to deal with its perceived internal enemies. They turn on the Armenian population, accusing them of sympathizing with Russia. What follows is a systematic campaign of deportation, massacre, and forced marches into the Syrian desert. The ancient Armenian community of Anatolia is virtually annihilated. It is a crime that will stain the final years of the empire forever. For the ordinary people of the empire, Turks, Arabs, Kurds, and others, the war is an unending nightmare. Famine grips the cities. The British naval blockade cuts off vital food imports. In the cities of Syria and Lebanon, people are literally starving to death in the streets. Conscription has stripped the villages of their young men, leaving fields untended and harvests to rot. Inflation spirals out of control, rendering money worthless. A loaf of bread, if it can be found at all, costs a fortune. The social fabric of the empire, woven together over 6 centuries, is unraveling thread by thread. Hope gives way to despair. Loyalty to the Sultan, once a sacred duty, is replaced by a desperate struggle for individual survival. The empire is not just losing a war, it is dying. Its institutions are failing, its people are suffering on an unimaginable scale, and the very idea of the Ottoman state is evaporating in the heat of conflict and internal strife. The sky over the empire has grown dark, the storm has broken, and there is no shelter to be found. By 1918, after 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed and suffering, the end is near. Defeated on every front, its armies shattered, its people broken, the Ottoman Empire sues for an armistice. The once great power that had dominated the world stage for half a millennium signs its own death warrant. The sick man of Europe is finally dead. In the ruins, new nations will be born, new borders will be drawn, and the modern Middle East will emerge from the ashes of a fallen empire. But the scars of its violent end and the ghosts of its final, agonizing years will haunt the region for generations to come. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of history's most pivotal moments. If you found this story compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the past. Your support means the world. See you next time. The year is 1922. In the twilight halls of Yildiz Palace, a faint golden light struggles against the encroaching dusk, much like the empire it represents. This isn't a story of grand battles or heroic charges, but of a quiet, inexorable end. A story whispered in the corridors of power, carried on the gentle breezes of the Bosphorus. For 6 centuries, the House of Osman had been the shadow and substance of one of the world's greatest empires. Now, its final days were unfolding not with a bang, but with the soft rustle of diplomatic papers and the turning of history's page. The story of the end begins, as many do, with a war. The Great War. The Ottoman Empire, the sick men of Europe, had gambled and lost. By 1918, the guns fell silent, but the defeat was deafening. The armistice of Mudros wasn't just a ceasefire. It was a surrender of sovereignty. Allied warships sailed into the Golden Horn, their gray hulls a stark contrast to the glittering domes and minarets of Constantinople. The city, once the heart of an empire that stretched across 3 continents, was now under occupation. For its residents, it was a daily humiliation. Foreign soldiers patrolled streets that once belonged only to the Janissaries and the Sultan's guards. The capital of the Caliphate was a city besieged from within. Inside the palace walls, Sultan Mehmed VI Vakhideddin sat upon a throne that felt more like a cage. He was a man caught between the ghosts of his powerful ancestors and the stark reality of his powerlessness. He had inherited a crown, but not an empire. His authority barely extended beyond the palace gardens. The real power was shifting, moving eastward to the heart of Anatolia, where a new movement was stirring. A nationalist resistance, led by a determined general named Mustafa Kemal, was gathering strength. They refused to accept the carving up of their homeland by foreign powers. They were fighting for a new idea, not of a multi-ethnic empire ruled by a sultan, but of a sovereign Turkish nation. While the Sultan in Constantinople was forced to cooperate with the occupying allies, Mustafa Kemal and his followers established a rival government. In Ankara, they called it the Grand National Assembly. This created a strange and untenable situation. 2 governments claiming to represent one people. One, the old imperial government in Constantinople, was a puppet of foreign powers. The other, the new nationalist government in Ankara, was fighting for its very existence. The division was stark. In 1920, the Sultan's government signed the Treaty of Sevres, a document so punitive it would have dismembered what was left of the empire, leaving only a small Turkish state in central Anatolia completely at the mercy of the Allies. For the nationalists in Ankara, this was the ultimate betrayal. The treaty was a death sentence, and they refused to sign it. This act of defiance galvanized the Turkish War of Independence. For the next 2 years, a bitter struggle ensued. It was a war fought not just against foreign armies, but against the old order the Sultan represented. While Mehmed VI remained in his occupied capital, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara led the nation to a stunning victory. By the autumn of 1922, the Greek armies had been driven from Anatolia, and the Turkish nationalists stood as the undisputed masters of their own land. With victory secured, the final reckoning was at hand. The Allies, seeing the new reality, invited both the Ankara government and the Sultan's government in Constantinople to a peace conference in Lausanne, Switzerland. This was the moment of truth. Mustafa Kemal and the Grand National Assembly would not allow the old, discredited imperial government to have a seat at the table. They would not allow the Sultan to speak for a nation he had all but abandoned. And so, on the 1st of November, 1922, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara passed a law that would echo through the centuries. It was a simple, yet monumental act. The law declared that the office of the Sultanate of the Ottoman Empire was abolished. Just like that, 623 years of continuous imperial rule came to an end. There was no grand ceremony, no abdication speech from the throne. It was a legislative act, a decision made by the elected representatives of the Turkish people. The Caliphate, the religious leadership role held by the Sultan, was temporarily separated and retained by the House of Osman. But the political power, the very essence of the Sultanate, was gone forever. Back in Constantinople, the news arrived like a final, fatal blow. Mehmed VI was no longer a sultan. He was simply a citizen, and a controversial one at that, seen by many as a collaborator. Fearing for his life, he made a desperate plea. On the 17th of November, he secretly requested protection from the British. In the pre-dawn hours, under a cloak of darkness, the last reigning sultan of the Ottoman Empire was quietly spirited away from his palace. He walked down to the waterfront, a man stripped of his titles in his country, and boarded a British warship, the HMS Malaya, sailing into exile. He would never see his homeland again. Imagine the scene. The lights in the Grand Almabak and Yildiz palaces steaming, one by one. The sprawling courtyards, once bustling with courtiers, eunuchs, and pashas, falling silent. The echoes of imperial decrees, replaced by the quiet hum of a city on the cusp of a new era. From the hills of Galata, one could look across the Golden Horn and see the silhouette of the old city, the Topkapi Palace standing as a silent monument to a bygone age. The sun set on the empire, casting long shadows over the mosques and markets. But as twilight fell on Constantinople, a new dawn was breaking over Ankara. The fall of the Sultanate wasn't just the end of a dynasty, it was the end of a worldview. The idea of a divinely ordained ruler, a padishah, who was the shadow of God on earth, gave way to the principle of national sovereignty. The Ottoman subject became the Turkish citizen. The imperial capital, Constantinople, would soon be renamed Istanbul, but the seat of power had moved permanently to Ankara. A new republic was born from the ashes of the old empire, ready to forge its own identity. Modern, secular, and fiercely independent. The story ends here, in the quiet aftermath. The magnificent palaces became museums, their opulent rooms now filled with curious visitors instead of powerful viziers. The story of the last sultans is a poignant reminder that even the most enduring institutions can fade into history, leaving behind only memories, legends, and the beautiful, silent city that witnessed it all. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this story captivating, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more explorations of history's turning points. Your support helps us continue to bring these moments to life. Until next time, as the sun rises over the Bosphorus, casting a golden hue on the domes and minarets of Istanbul, it's easy to feel the weight of history. This city, once Constantinople, the heart of empires, now awakens to a new day. But the echoes of its past, particularly the 6 centuries of the Ottoman Empire, resonate far beyond its shores, shaping our world in ways we often don't even realize. For 2 minutes, let's just reflect. Think about the world map. The borders of many countries in the Middle East, North Africa, and the Balkans were drawn in the aftermath of the Ottoman Empire's collapse. The lines on our maps today are a direct legacy of its vast reach and eventual dissolution. These borders, sometimes drawn with little regard for the ethnic, religious, and cultural tapestry on the ground, are the source of so much of the region's modern story, its triumphs and its turmoil. From Syria and Iraq to Greece and Serbia, nations grapple with identities forged both within and against the shadow of Ottoman rule. And it's not just politics. Think about your coffee. That rich, dark brew we savor in the morning. The global coffeehouse culture has its roots in the bustling cafes of Istanbul, Damascus, and Cairo, which were social and intellectual hubs of the Ottoman world. The methods of brewing, the very ritual of sitting and talking over a cup, traveled from the empire, across the Europe, and eventually to America. The tulip, a flower we associate with the Netherlands, was an obsession in the Ottoman court long before it reached Amsterdam. It was a symbol of beauty and divine perfection, celebrated in art, poetry, and sprawling gardens. These are just small threads, but they are woven deeply into the fabric of our global culture. The Ottomans were not a distant, isolated empire. They were a crossroads, a bridge between East and West, and their influence flows through the veins of our modern life, often unseen but always present. This enduring legacy isn't just a story of sultans and conquests. It's a story of human connection, of ideas and tastes that crossed continents and centuries to become part of our own daily experience. The Ottoman story is one of incredible complexity, a tapestry woven with threads of military genius, artistic brilliance, religious tolerance, and bureaucratic stagnation. It was an empire that, at its age, stretched across 3 continents, a superpower of its time that challenged the might of Europe and governed a stunningly diverse population of Muslims, Christians, and Jews. So, how did this colossal power rise from a small Anatolian principality to rule for over 600 years? His followers, the Osmanlis, or Ottomans, were driven by a combination of nomadic warrior spirit and a devout Islamic faith. They expanded rapidly, first through Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, and then into the Balkans. Their military was formidable. The Janissaries, an elite infantry unit made up of Christian boys converted to Islam, were perhaps the first modern standing army in Europe. The last vestige of the Roman Empire had fallen, and a new Islamic powerhouse had firmly established itself on the European stage. The golden age of the Ottoman Empire arguably arrived under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century. He was a contemporary of England as Henry VIII and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, and in many ways, he outshone them all. Suleiman's armies pushed the empire's borders to their furthest extent, besieging Vienna at the very heart of Europe and controlling vast territories in the Middle East and North Africa. But his reign was about more than just conquest. It was known as the Lawgiver for his comprehensive legal reforms, which standardized laws across the empire's diverse provinces. This was also a period of incredible cultural and artistic flourishing. The architect Mimar Sinan, a true genius of his time, designed hundreds of magnificent mosques, bridges, and palaces, including the stunning Süleymani Mosque in Istanbul. His work defined the classical Ottoman architectural style, with its grand domes, slender minarets, and intricate tilework. The arts thrived, from detailed calligraphy and manuscript illumination to beautiful ceramics and textiles. Istanbul became one of the world's great cities, a vibrant center of commerce, culture, and learning. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Ottoman Empire was its system for governing a deeply diverse population. The millet system allowed religious minorities, primarily Orthodox Christians, Armenian Christians, and Jews to govern their own communities according to their own laws and customs. Each millet was headed by its own religious leader, who was responsible for things like marriage, divorce, and inheritance, and collected taxes on behalf of the Sultan. For centuries, this system allowed for a level of religious coexistence that was rare in pre-modern era. Cities like Istanbul, Thessaloniki, and Sarajevo were cosmopolitan melting pots, where mosques, churches, and synagogues stood site. However, no empire lasts forever. By the 18th century, The seeds of decline were taking root. The Janissary core, once the empire's strength, became a corrupt and rebellious force, often resisting much-needed reforms. The world was also changing around the Ottomans. The Industrial Revolution in Europe created a massive technological and economic gap. European powers, with their superior navies and industries, began to dominate global trade routes that the Ottomans once controlled. Internally, the rise of nationalism, an idea imported from Europe, proved to be a powerful, destabilizing force. Ethnic and religious groups within the empire, like the Greeks, Serbs, and Bulgarians, began to dream of their own independent nations. The 19th century became a story of struggle, as Ottoman sultans attempted a series of ambitious reforms, known as the Tanzimat, to modernize the state, the military, and the economy. They sought to create a new sense of common Ottoman citizenship to hold the fragmenting empire together. But for many, these reforms were too little, too late. The empire became known as the sick man of Europe, a sprawling but weakened state whose territories were eyed greedily by its European neighbors. The final blow came with World War I. The Ottoman leadership made the fateful decision to ally with Germany and the Central Powers. The war was a disaster for the empire. It faced invasions on multiple fronts, from the British in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the Russians in the Caucasus, and Allied forces at Gallipoli. The conflict also saw the horrific tragedy of the Armenian genocide, a dark chapter in which the Ottoman government orchestrated the systematic extermination of its Armenian citizens. By 1918, the empire was defeated and occupied by Allied forces. Out of the ashes, a Turkish nationalist movement, led by a brilliant military commander named Mustafa Kemal, fought a war of independence to forge a new nation. In 1922, the last Ottoman Sultan was deposed. In the following year, the Republic of Turkey was officially declared, with Mustafa Kemal, now known as Ataturk, father of the Turks, as its first president. The 600-year story of the Ottoman Empire had come to an end. So, as we look back from our 21st century vantage point, what is the lasting memory of this empire? It's not just a story of decline. It's the architectural wonders that still dominate the skyline of Istanbul. The rich culinary traditions that spread across the Mediterranean and the Middle East, from kebabs and baklava to yogurt and stuffed vegetables. It is the legal and administrative systems that provided a blueprint for many of the modern states that emerged from its territory. It reminds us that our world is not a collection of isolated islands, but a deeply interconnected web of histories. The story of the Ottoman Empire is not just Turkish history, or Middle Eastern history, or European history. It is, in a very real sense, part of our shared human story. As the light spreads across the ancient hills of Istanbul, it illuminates a past that is not truly past. It lives on in the language, the food, the faith, and the very identity of millions. It challenges us to look beyond simple narratives of clash and conflict, and to see the more complex, more human story of exchange, adaptation, and shared existence. And in that understanding, perhaps we can find a little more hope for our own interconnected world. Thanks for watching. Follow 4 more journeys into our shared past.